So today we're going to have a look at making bread dough. We're going to do this by making a very simple version of a focaccia. It's not a very traditional focaccia. That takes a lot longer than we have. We only have about 50 minutes to make this in, which is not enough time to make a really good bread product, if we're honest. But we're going to do our best. We're going to make something which is passable. And then once you know the basics, you'll be able to make much better versions. So we're starting with strong white bread flour. Wholemeal bread flour is absolutely amazing. It's much higher in fibre, but it's going to be a lot harder to knead and to knead it well in the time that we have. So we're going to use white bread flour. You can use plain flour, it will work. But bread flour has got a higher protein content and it will make a stretchier dough. So bread flour would be preferable. To this, we are going to add a teaspoon or 1 sachet of yeast, fast action dry yeast. We're going to add half a teaspoon of salt, and we're going to add 1 tablespoon of sugar. Normally we would add the same amount of salt as yeast, but again we are really short on time, so actually we've got way more yeast here than we'd use in a normal for this amount of flour normally. Usually we'd use that amount of yeast for 500 grams of flour. But the yeast is going to push the bread dough up. It's going to create carbon dioxide and it's going to make the bread rise. And we need it to work as quickly as we possibly can in this, for this one. The salt's going to make everything taste better, but it will slow the yeast down. So we're using slightly less salt today, and then we're going to add more salt later. So it's going to be absolutely fine. And the sugar is going to give the yeast a real kickstart to get it going. Okay. So we're not going to use any other equipment today. We're going to use as little equipment as possible because I don't like washing up, basically. Once you've got all your dry ingredients in your bowl, you need to measure out about 150 to 200 millilitres of warm water. We want it to be body temperature. The way you check its body temperature, this has got a bit of oil in it, but that's what looks a bit odd on the top. But you just stick your finger in it. And if it feels like not hot, not cold, then that's the perfect temperature. The yeast is alive. And to make it work, the temperature it likes the best is body temperature. So we are going to use body temperature water to make the yeast work at its absolute best. Okay, we're going to give this all a bit of a mix together with our hands. And then we're going to add the water a little bit at a time. You might need all the water, you might need less. It really depends on everyone's flour is going to be slightly different. We're going to use our hands so that we can feel the dough and feel if it's the right texture. So a little bit of water, mix it in. A little bit of water, mix it in. And you see it starting to stick together. A little bit of water. We're not looking for it to look like a dough, if that makes sense. It doesn't make sense at all, does it? But what we're looking for is something called a shaggy dough, where it's just starting to stick together. These bits are good. How they're just sticking together. They're good. I'm going to take them out because they're perfect just as they are. And then I can focus on the dry. So I'm going to add a little bit of water to this. use my hands to bring it together. A bit more. That bit's now good. Take that out. I've only got this little bit left. And that's then good. It will all be stuck to your hands. It'll be fine. Don't worry about it. So, this is pretty much what we're looking for. It's just sticking together. It's quite stretchy. It's just sticking together. We can add a little bit more water now. It'll be absolutely fine. But it should stick together as we try and bring it together into a dough. We add our water a little bit at a time so we can add more water, but you can't take water out. And if you add way too much water, a little bit too much water, we can add a bit of flour. Loads too much water, and we'll just have to start again. Okay, so it should then, when you start to push it together, come together like this. Okay, now we're not going to knead into flour today, we're going to knead into oil. The oil is going to give us a better flavour and it helps the dough not stick to the table. So a little bit of oil, nice olive oil, and then we're going to start to knead the dough. So in school you're going to split this dough in half and give half to your buddy and you knead half. Like I said, it's all stuck to your hands, but once you finish kneading the bread dough, it'll have all come off, I promise. But if we all go and wash our hands when they look like this, then all that bread dough is going to end up going down the sink and we'll end up with blocked sinks. It will come off. It's one of the signs that you've kneaded it for long enough. When we knead, we use the heel of our hand here. We're going to stretch the dough, roll it up, turn it, stretch, roll, turn, stretch, roll, turn. And what we're trying to do is stretch out the protein, develop the gluten. At the moment, it's all ripping apart. When it's done, it'll be lovely and smooth and stretchy. But this is not kneading. This is not kneading. We need to stretch the dough. You can do it like this. But if you hold it with your fingertips and then stretch it, you know that you are definitely working that gluten. I'm doing it quite slowly now to show you. In the lesson, you're going to need to move quickly. The amount of time that we have to knead is nowhere near long enough. And it really depends on how quick you've got yourself sorted at the start of the lesson. Your teacher will give you as long as they possibly can. But we all need to get our bread into the oven in enough time for it to cook, which really dictates how long we have left to knead it. So if you get yourself sorted and are ready to go on the bell, not arriving on the bell, then you'll have longer to knead. Okay, so it's still looking really brittle, I suppose. It's breaking apart really easily. The more you knead it, the smoother it will become, the stretchier it will become. But you're going to have to really work it. Stretch, roll, push it together, turn. Stretch, roll, push it together, turn. Okay. Now, like a good Blue Peter presenter, I actually made one earlier. And you can see how much more elastic it is now? And how much smoother the dough is. Yours probably won't reach this point in an hour's lesson, if we're honest. I needed this for quite a bit longer. When your teacher tells you you're out of time, you need to knead your dough into a ball, which I just did unconsciously, but I'll show you again. So what you do is put both bits together, finger in the middle, stretch, turn, stretch into the middle, 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 turn, and then flip it. You then give it a little, so I've got my hands angled downwards, which makes the top nice and smooth, and gives you tension. So it should look a bit like this. You're going to take a lined baking tray, like this one, pop it in the middle. I'm just going to check that you're in focus. There we go. So, onto a lined baking tray. This is just a reusable silicone liner. In school, we'll just use some baking parchment, and you can do that at home as well. But I didn't even need it for long enough, and you can see my hands are almost clean. You're going to use the heel of your hand again, start in the middle, and press out. We want an even thickness. Ideally nice and round, but it doesn't have to be. There's nothing that says it has to be round. But a nice even thickness. So that it cooks evenly. If you've got it thicker this end and thinner this end, then this end's going to end up doughy and this end's going to be like crisp bread. Now we're going to add our flavours. So the recommendation is to bring some rosemary. This is rosemary, straight from the garden. Well, it's had a wash. It's a really delicious herb. Take little sprigs like this, put them between your forefinger and your thumb, and you just wiggle it in. You want it to go really deep into the bread, all the way down to the bottom, so that the flavour then infuses out into the bread dough. You don't want to use dried rosemary, you want to use fresh. Dried rosemary just sort of sits on the top and doesn't really do much. If you wanted to use some oregano, you absolutely could. It is an option. But there are other things that you could add as well. I've got some slithers of garlic here, which I'm going to add. I'm going to do it in exactly the same way. I'm going to make a little hole and push it right down into the bottom. Olives, so make a hole, push it right down in. You could use some nice sun-dried tomatoes. If you're using sun-dried tomatoes, make sure they're really, really well in, because if they sit on the top, they tend to burn. Further, because I want it in the dough, so it's the dough flavour. A little press out, just in the middle, because it's getting a little domed in the middle, mine. Sure that's right in, sure that's right in. Okay, and then we're going to leave this to prove. Now, if you're doing this at home, you want to get some cling film, put a thin layer of oil over the top, and put an oil layer down to let, well, basically it acts as a protective layer, and the oil's going to stop it from sticking. In school, there's no point. We don't have time to let it prove for very long. It's not going to form a skin over the top. You're just going to put it somewhere nice and warm. Usually we put them in turn the oven on to 200 degrees. So usually the grill is nice and hot, but not actually on. So we usually pop them in there for about 10 minutes to let the yeast start to work. If you're doing this at home, don't put it in the grill. Just keep it somewhere nice and warm for about 40 minutes to an hour until it's doubled in size. Okay. But this is now ready just to sit and for the yeast to work for a little bit before we pop it into the oven. So this has been proving for 15 minutes. Yeah, like I said, at home you probably want to leave it for 40 minutes to an hour, but I want to show you exactly what it'll be like in school. So what we're going to do is we're going to start by pressing in all of the flavourings because we want them deep into the dough. Can you see how the dough is puffed up already? That's the yeast starting to work, creating carbon dioxide. Then what we're going to do is we're going to put a little bit of oil on our hands, just a little bit, because we're then going to push holes with our fingers. We want our fingers to not stick in the dough. Push, push, push. Poke some holes into the dough. because these are going to act as little wells to hold our next flavour, which is extra virgin olive oil, or just olive oil. Okay, so you're going to get some, you'll need to bring in a little extra oil, and you're just going to that over the top, drizzle that, and we want it to sit in all those little wells that we've made. And that's going to help flavour the dough. Give us a lovely flavour. If you don't really like olive, go for a mild olive oil. If you're a big olive fan, go for an extra virgin olive oil. Okay, I'm just going to wash my hands off a minute. Then the final step is some coarse sea salt, or some salt flakes, just go over the top. And then this, because I did tell you earlier that I was going to put more salt on it, didn't I? This now goes into the oven until it's risen, it's golden brown, and when we tap the bottom, it's going to sound hollow. What's probably going to happen, because it hasn't been proved for long enough, is that it will split at the side. When you make it at home, if you've let it double in size, that won't happen. But it probably will for this one, because it hasn't been proven for long enough. Okay, but this now goes into the oven. Okay, so it's come out the oven, and I gave it another quick drizzle with a bit of oil. But as you can see, sort of golden brown. The bread has risen up around the olive and the garlic and the rosemary, and if we lift it up, oh hello, it is very hot. Sounds hollow when we tap the bottom, which tells us that it's set around the air bubbles. You can't cut it while it's hot. Warm, yes, but hot, no. If you try and cut it, what will happen is that the dough will squish and it will compress all of those air bubbles, and what will end up is just like raw bread dough again, so it just won't work. So you need to think about how you're going to take this home. If I was you, I'd just bring a little bit of foil and a sticky label with your name on it, wrap it up in foil, stick your sticky label with your name on it, or a bit of masking tape with your name on it, or something like that. Because obviously if everybody's is wrapped up in foil, they're all going to look identical. And then you can wrap it up and take it home like that. We are going to eat this with some spaghetti and meatballs tonight for our dinner. I make quite a similar bread, and we have it with like salami sandwiches, things like that in our house. But you could eat it with anything that's nice on its own with a bit of olive oil. But yeah. Is it a perfect focaccia? No, not by any stretch. Like I said, if you were going to do this at home, you'd give it a first proof before you shaped it. You would let it proof for much longer. You need it for much longer. You'd let it proof for much longer. Probably add a bit more liquid to it, have a wetter dough. But in an hour, which is what I've made this in, it's a good first step of learning. So if you're making this at home, let it prove until it's at least doubled in size. And then you bake until it sounds hollow on the bottom. You do not need to bring in olives and garlic and rosemary. You can just choose one thing. Okay? And if you don't want to use big flaky salt, you don't have to. You can just leave the salt off altogether, but the salt does make it taste really good. Okay guys, so it's up to you what you flavour it with. Rosemary, olives, garlic, sun-dried tomatoes, or a combination. It's up to you. Please do remember though to bring in strong white bread flour or white plain flour. The whole grain flour takes far too long to knead and it's just not going to work brilliantly. Right. Hope it goes well in your lesson, and I hope you have another go at making it at home.